Imagine waking up one morning to a nightmare. You're being told you murdered the person you love. You're in handcuffs. You're facing life in prison. But you swear on everything you didn't do it. And what if the real story was something much darker? This is not just another true crime story. This case has shaken an entire community and divided public opinion like never before. It's the kind of case that forces you to ask, can we really trust the system? A case that shook a nation. Karen Red was a 44-year-old finance professional from Massachusetts. Smart, successful. By all accounts, she had her life together. She was in a serious relationship with John O'Keefe, a respected Boston police officer. They seemed like a normal couple. But in the early hours of January 29th, 2022, something went terribly wrong. John was found unresponsive in the snow, outside the home of another police officer. He was bruised, battered, and barely alive. Hours later, he was pronounced dead. The police wasted no time. They pointed the finger at Karen Red. They said she hit John with her SUV, then left him to die in the freezing cold. They said she was drunk, angry, reckless. They found her broken taillight, claiming it was proof she backed into him. They even found Google searches like, "How long to die in cold?" The evidence looked damning. Within days, Karen Reed was arrested, charged with second-degree murder, and labeled a cold-blooded killer. The prosecution told a simple, shocking story. She did it. She knew it. She tried to cover it up. But then, the story took a dark turn. Karen Reed fought back, and her defense team made an explosive claim. They say she never hit John at all. They say John was attacked inside the house, beaten, then thrown outside. They say this case is not about murder, but about a cover-up. Why? Because the house where John was found belonged to a fellow police officer. They argued. Would police protect one of their own? Would they go so far as to frame an innocent woman to protect a much bigger secret? This is where the case became more than just a courtroom drama. It became a national obsession. Murder or cover-up? You decide. Right now, Karen Reed's fate hangs in the balance. Some people believe she's guilty, that the evidence is clear. Others believe she's been framed by the same system that was supposed to seek justice. And that's why you need to hear the full story. By the end of this video, you'll have all the facts, the evidence, the contradictions, the shocking twists. And then you could decide for yourself. Did Karen Reed kill her boyfriend? Or is this a corrupt system protecting its own? This case is far from over. In fact, it's more explosive than ever. So stay with me, because the truth, it's never as simple as it seems. Who is Karen Reed? Before her name was plastered across headlines, before she became the face of one of the most controversial murder trials in recent years, Karen Reed was just an ordinary woman. She was 44 years old, a financial analyst from Massachusetts, and, by all accounts, successful. She had built a stable career in finance, known for her intelligence, professionalism, and hard-working nature. She wasn't the type to attract controversy. She wasn't a troublemaker. She was just living her life, working hard, and making plans of future. And part of that future included a man, John O'Keefe. A love story, or was it? John O'Keefe wasn't just any man. He was a respected Boston police officer, a veteran with 16 years on the force, and someone well-liked in his community. People knew him as a dedicated officer, someone who took his job seriously, and a man who had devoted his life to service. Karen and John had been together for years. They weren't just dating casually. Their relationship was serious. To outsiders, they seemed like a happy, successful couple, two professionals who had found love while balancing their careers. They went on vacations, attended events together, and spent time with friends and family. But as we all know, what people see on the outside isn't always a full story. Behind closed doors, the cracks begin to show. Friends and family later revealed that Karen and John's relationship wasn't always picture perfect. There were arguments, there were jealousy issues, and there were moments of tension that raised questions. Did they love each other? Absolutely. But was it always smooth sailing? Not quite. Some sources say Karen was devoted to John, always trying to make things work despite their differences. Others say their relationship was rocky, with intense fights that sometimes left Karen feeling insecure about where she stood with him. The night that changed everything. Karen Reed and John O'Keefe had spent years building a life together. But in one night, one freezing night in January 2022, everything they had was shattered. One moment, they were a couple navigating the ups and downs of love. The next, John was dead. How did it all go so wrong? What really happened that night? And was Karen Reed truly responsible? Or was this a much bigger, darker story? The night that changed everything. It was January 29th, 2022, a frigid winter night in Canton, Massachusetts. The roads were slick with ice, and the wind cut through like a knife. It was the kind of night where most people stayed in, bundled under blankets, avoiding the brutal chill of the New England winter. But for Karen Reed and John O'Keefe, the night was just beginning. They were out drinking, celebrating, having what should have been just another Saturday night. No one knew then that by morning, John O'Keefe would be dead, and Karen Reed's life would be shattered beyond repair. A night out, a party, and a deadly mystery. Karen and John were a couple, not perfect, but committed. That night, they had drinks at a local bar, a common weekend routine. Friends and acquaintances said they were in good spirits, socializing, laughing, blending in with the crowd. But something shifted as the night progressed. Karen, who had been drinking, decided to drive John to a house party at Brian Albert's house. Brian Albert was another Boston police officer, a man in law enforcement like John. This wasn't just a random gathering. This was a party full of police officers and people in power. Why Karen didn't go inside with John that night remains one of the biggest mysteries of the case. Some say she dropped him off and left. Others suggest there was an argument, a rift between them, one that made her drive away. Whatever the reason, only John O'Keefe walked into that house. And from that moment, everything changed. The discovery, a man left for dead. Hours later, before sunrise, Karen Reed was back outside Brian Albert's house. She had been calling and texting John with no response. Something felt wrong. That's when she saw him, lying motionless in the snow, half buried, just outside the house. His body was battered, cuts, bruises, swollen eyes. He was barely breathing. The snow beneath him had turned a deep, eerie red, blood soaking into the ice. Karen panicked. She screamed, tried to wake him, but John wouldn't move. She called for help. The neighbors came running. 911 was dialed. Paramedics arrived. But by then it was too late. John O'Keefe was rushed to the hospital, but within hours, he was pronounced dead. What should have been a normal Saturday night had turned into a crime scene. And almost immediately, all eyes were on Karen Reed. The broken taillight and the beginning of a nightmare. As investigators combed through the scene, their focus quickly shifted to Karen Reed. Her SUV's taillight was shattered. Fragments of red glass were found near where John's body had been. The police suggested that Karen had run him over, left him to die, and driven off. The theory? Karen, drunk and angry, backed into John with her car. Instead of helping him, she panicked and fled the scene. Her broken taillight was a smoking gun. And just like that, the woman who loved John O'Keefe was now the prime suspect in his murder. A shocking arrest. The woman who loved him, now accused of killing him. Karen was arrested within days, charged with second-degree murder, labeled a killer in the press, dragged into the justice system like a common criminal. Her entire life, her career, her reputation, was destroyed overnight. But there was one massive problem with the prosecution's case. Karen Reed insisted she was innocent, and soon, cracks began to appear in the story police were telling. The first red flags. Was this really a hit and run? As Karen's defense team began digging, things didn't add up. The injuries weren't consistent with a car accident. Medical experts suggested that John's wounds looked more like he'd been beaten, not hit by a car. His injuries included blunt force trauma to the head, a swollen face, and multiple cuts and bruises. Injuries that didn't match what you'd expect from a hit and run. John's body position raised questions. If Karen had backed into John, why was his body several feet away from her car's path? Why were there no obvious skid marks? No signs of an impact at the scene. The party house had security cameras, but no footage was ever released. Why did no one inside the house hear or see anything? How could John have been lying outside in the snow for hours, unnoticed by anyone at the party? The more the defense dug, the more it seemed like something wasn't right. The cover-up theory. Did someone else kill John? Then came the bombshell claim. Karen Reed's defense team accused the police of a cover-up. They said John was beaten to death inside the house. His body was dragged outside and left in the snow. The police framed Karen to protect one of their own. Why? Because the party that night was filled with officers, lawyers, and powerful people. If someone in that house was responsible, they couldn't afford to let the truth come out. And suddenly, this wasn't just a murder case. This was a scandal, a conspiracy, murder, mistake, or conspiracy. The case that divided a nation. Was Karen Reed a grieving girlfriend being framed for a crime she didn't commit? Or was she a reckless woman who killed her boyfriend and is now trying to cover her tracks? This case isn't just about what happened that night. It's about who we trust. It's about power, influence in the justice system. And it's about how one tragic night turned into a battle for the truth. One thing is for sure. Karen Reed's fight is far from over. The murder accusation. The moment John O'Keefe was pronounced dead, the police needed an explanation. A Boston police officer had died under mysterious circumstances, and the public wanted answers. The pressure was on. Within hours, law enforcement had a suspect, and it wasn't someone from inside the house where John had been that night. It was Karen Reed. And just like that, the woman who had loved John, who had built a life with him, became the villain of the story. She wasn't just a grieving girlfriend anymore. She was now a murderer. The prosecution's theory. A drunken night turned deadly. The prosecution wasted no time in laying out their version of events. According to them, the events of January 29th, 2022, unfolded like this. Karen and John had been drinking heavily that night. They argued in the car outside Brian Albert's house. In a fit of anger, Karen hit John with her SUV as she backed up. Instead of stopping to help, she panicked and drove away, leaving John to freeze to death in the snow. The prosecution made it sound simple, clean, and undeniable. But was it? The key evidence against Karen Reed. To make their case, the state zeroed in on 3 key pieces of evidence. 1. The broken taillight. One of the first things investigators noticed was Karen Reed's SUV. The right rear taillight was shattered. Small red glass fragments were found near John's body. Police claimed this proved that Karen's car had hit John that night. The message was clear. Her car was damaged. The glass was there. She must have done it. But was it that simple? 2. The Google search. How long to die in cold? Then there was the search history. Investigators pulled Karen's phone records and found one chilling Google search. How long to die in cold? To the prosecution, this was a smoking gun. Why would someone Google that unless they were trying to figure out how long it would take for a person to freeze to death? Was she trying to cover her tracks, researching how much time she had before John's body would be discovered? But Karen's defense fought back. They argued the search was taken out of context. Karen was in a state of panic that morning, desperately trying to understand what had happened. People Google strange things when they're in shock. It didn't mean she was guilty. Could that be true? Or was this proof that she knew exactly what she had done? 3. The alleged statement. Did I hit him? Oh my God. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from witness statements. Multiple people, including police officers, claimed that when Karen saw John's body that morning, she collapsed in shock and said, "Did I hit him? Oh my God." Recreate the scene. Karen standing in the snow, her voice trembling, hands over her mouth as she gasped those words. The prosecution used this to suggest that she was confessing. Why would she ask that if she didn't do it? Why would those words be the first thing out of her mouth? To them, this was a moment of guilt slipping through. But Karen's defense team had another explanation. She was in shock. She was desperately trying to piece together what happened. She wasn't admitting guilt. She was processing the horror of finding John dying in the snow. The public turns against Karen Reed. Once these details went public, the court of public opinion made its decision. Karen Reed was a monster. News headlines screamed about her Google search. True crime podcasts painted her as a jealous, unstable girlfriend. Social media erupted with theories, calling her guilty before the trial even began. The image of the grieving girlfriend shattered. Now, Karen was seen as a reckless drunk who couldn't control herself, a selfish woman who cared more about saving herself than saving John, someone who let a man freeze to death and Googled it later. But behind the scenes, her defense team was fighting back. Because while the prosecution's version of events made sense on the surface, there were cracks in their story. And soon, those cracks would get bigger. The big question, is there more to the story? If Karen Reed didn't kill John, then what happened? Her defense team would soon argue. The injuries didn't match a hit and run. There were too many inconsistencies. And most importantly, the people inside that house that night knew more than they were saying. Which raises the biggest question of all. Was Karen Reed truly guilty? Or was she set up to take the fall for something much darker? Karen Reed's defense. The cover-up theory. From the moment Karen Reed was charged, her defense team told a completely different story. According to them, this wasn't an accident at all. They argued John O'Keefe wasn't killed by Karen's SUV. He was attacked inside Brian Albert's house and dumped outside in the snow. The retrial killers needed a scapegoat, and Karen was the perfect one. But why? Because this wasn't just any house party. It was a gathering of Boston law enforcement officers. And if something horrible happened inside that house, the people involved had the power to cover it up. The suspicious details, why Karen's story might be true. If Karen Reed really did run John over, the evidence should have been clear. But the deeper her lawyers dug, the more things didn't add up. Here's what they found. 1. The injuries. Did they match a car accident? If John O'Keefe was hit by a car, his injuries should have been consistent with a vehicle impact. But doctors noticed something strange. He had cuts and bruises all over his body. His eye was swollen shut, as if he'd been punched. His arm was broken in a way that suggested a struggle. Does that sound like someone who was hit by a car? Or does it sound like someone who was beaten up? 2. The missing security footage. The area outside Brian Albert's house had security cameras, but when investigators asked for footage, it was missing. Why wasn't there any video of John outside the house? If Karen hit him, wouldn't there be footage showing her SUV? Why did the homeowners not turn over security footage that could have cleared everything up? Convenient or suspicious? 3. Witness tampering. Was the investigation rigged? Karen's defense team dug deeper, and what they found was disturbing. Multiple witnesses claimed that investigators pressured them to say certain things. Some people changed their stories over time. Others said police told them what to say. A key witness reportedly said, "They made me sign something I didn't want to." If Karen was guilty, why did witnesses need to be manipulated? The broken taillight planted evidence? One of the biggest pieces of evidence against Karen Reed was her broken taillight. Police said her SUV's right rear taillight was shattered. They found red glass near John's body. This proved she had hit him and left him there. But Karen's defense had a shocking counterargument. The tail light was planted. Their evidence? The timing didn't make sense. Witnesses saw Karen's car earlier that night, and the tail light wasn't broken. So when did it break? The red glass fragments at the scene? They were found hours later, after police had already been there. Why didn't they see it the first time? Karen's SUV had no blood or tissue on it. If she had hit John, wouldn't there be some impact damage beyond just a broken light? Was the broken tail light real evidence? Or was it placed there to frame her? To protect their own theory? Karen Reed's defense didn't hold back. They pointed out something no one could ignore. This case involved law enforcement officers investigating a crime at another officer's house. Would they protect one of their own? Would they hide the truth to protect a fellow cop? The defense argued that the police had every reason to cover up what really happened inside Brian Albert's house. If John was beaten inside the house, then someone at that party was responsible. That means multiple officers knew something they weren't saying. If Karen took the blame, the truth stayed buried. Would they turn against their own or find a scapegoat? What really happened that night? If Karen didn't kill John, then what did? Her defense suggests this timeline. John O'Keefe got into a fight inside Brian Albert's house. He was beaten and knocked unconscious. The people at the party panicked. They knew an officer had been hurt. Instead of calling 911, they dragged him outside and left him in the snow. They covered up the truth, knowing the easiest way out was to blame Karen. The biggest questions. Karen's defense raised serious questions. Why were John's injuries inconsistent with a car crash? Why was there no security footage? Why did witnesses change their stories? Why did the police focus only on Karen Red and ignore everything else? The trial would soon become one of the most controversial cases in years. Because now, it wasn't just about who killed John O'Keefe. It was about whether Karen Red was the real criminal or the real victim. The first trial, a shocking twist. In April 2024, the trial of Karen Reed commenced, capturing national attention. The prosecution presented a narrative of a tragic accident fueled by alcohol and emotion, while the defense argued a complex conspiracy implicating law enforcement in a cover-up. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found themselves at an impasse. Despite extensive discussions, they could not reach a unanimous verdict. On July 1st, 2024, Judge Beverly Cannoni declared a mistrial, acknowledging the jury's inability to agree. A mistrial declared what it means. A mistrial occurs when a jury cannot reach a unanimous decision, leading to neither a conviction nor an acquittal. This outcome left both the prosecution and defense preparing for a retrial, offering Karen Reed another opportunity to contest the charges against her. The new trial, a battle for truth. April 1st, 2025, retrial begins. On April 1st, 2025, jury selection commenced for Karen Reed's retrial. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as both sides prepared to revisit the complex and contentious case. A juror joins the defense team, an unprecedented move. In a remarkable development, Victoria Brophy George, a juror from the first trial, joined Karen Reed's defense team. An employment lawyer by profession, George cited concerns about the integrity of the initial investigation and a commitment to ensuring a fair trial as her motivations. Her transition from juror to defense advocate underscores the case's complexities and the profound impact it has had on those involved. What's at stake? Freedom and allegations of corruption. The retrial carries significant implications. For Karen Reed, a conviction could result in a life sentence, stripping her of freedom and future. For law enforcement, if the defense's cover-up allegations hold merit, it could unveil systemic corruption within the police department, shaking public trust and prompting widespread reforms. A community on edge, awaiting justice. As the retrial unfolds, the community remains divided. Supporters of both sides anxiously await new evidence and testimonies, hoping for clarity and justice in a case that has deeply affected many. The emotional ending, leaving the audience thinking, this case has divided a nation. On one side, a grieving family demands justice, believing Karen Red is responsible for John O'Keefe's tragic death. The prosecution argues that a moment of rage, mixed with alcohol, led to a fatal accident. They say the broken taillight, the Google searches, and her frantic words, "Did I hit him? Oh my God," are undeniable proof of her guilt. But then there's the other side, a woman who says she loved John. A defense team claiming this was never about a car accident, but about a deeper, darker cover-up. They point to the inconsistencies, the missing footage, the injuries that don't fully match a car impact. And now, a former juror standing with Karen, convinced that something sinister is at play. What if Karen Red is not the villain in this story, but its victim? The weight of this verdict. If Karen Reed is guilty, she could spend the rest of her life in prison. If she's innocent, then the real story, the one buried beneath layers of police ties, missing evidence, and conflicting testimonies, may never be fully uncovered. Either way, this case forces us to ask hard questions. Can we always trust a system that promises justice? How much power does law enforcement hold over the truth? And if Karen Red didn't do it, who did? What do you think? This isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a fight for truth. Is this justice or something far more sinister?